Marriage is not what? It's not sin. It's not sin. It says it right in 1 Corinthians 7. If they marry, they have not sinned. But there's guidelines for it. There are warnings about it. There's guidelines for it. It's not just supposed to be something that's off the cuff or just, all of a sudden or just because. There are guidelines for it and so on and so forth. So we found, hopefully, you see that when he says the husband of one wife, primarily what he's talking about is a person that doesn't have more than one wife at one time. It's not talking about one wife forever. And that's the way most people in our area take it, is if a man has a divorce for any reason, he's not qualified to preach or pastor, and specifically pastor, which is absolutely false. And the same thing is going to go for a deacon as well. Most churches around here will disqualify a man who's been married more than once as a deacon, which is also wrong, just as wrong. Of course, we went into some of the possible specific circumstances and things about that, and what kind of circumstances would lend it to be more wrong, maybe, or more not appropriate. And a lot of, like I said last time, it's do common sense. It's not talking about a man who just puts away a woman and goes and marries somebody the next day. Obviously, that person's not a very good candidate for a spiritual office in a local church. But it's not. What it's not saying is that a man who's been divorced is automatically disqualified. It's not what it's saying at all, or remarried for that matter. So that's about where we left off, and we got down to about verse 2 in apt to teach. As a very important thing, and I left off talking about my opinion about that, and that ties in with what you'll see in verse 6. At the beginning of verse 6, the qualification says, not a novice. Not a novice. A novice is a beginner.
Right.
Someone who is fresh, is green, is somebody who has no experience. And that's a very dangerous situation to be in, is someone who's a novice, has no experience in a very, what would you call it, a very, I lack of a better word, intense spiritual position, of very, very important, a place where there's a lot of spiritual struggle, okay? And he's going to tell you why that is in just a second, but we'll read on down. We'll read from verse 3. Okay, it says, not given to wine. So obviously, not given to wine means he's not a drunk, and he's not given to it. If you'll look at 1 Timothy 5 in verse 23, you'll see Paul's instruction for the legitimate use of wine and the only biblical legitimate use for it. In verse 23, he says, drink no longer water, but use a little wine for thy stomach's sake and thine often infirmities. So the only excuse, really, that a preacher or deacon, or Christian for that matter, has in using alcohol as a beverage is in medicinal purposes. And alcohol does have some medicinal value. I think it's in the Proverbs. It talks about to give hard drink to those that are ready to perish. Back in the day, if somebody was dying on a battlefield somewhere back in the Civil War or something, or had to have a bullet cut out of them or something, that's what you did to them to numb the pain. But it's not something that's just you're just allowed to just partake of for whatever reason. Just have one. We'll see more about that, but obviously when he says not given to wine, that's what he's talking about. Is somebody's not given to drink or strong drink or that matter. He's supposed to be an abstainer from it. No striker, so he's not a fighter. Somebody who's quick tempered, you could say. Because boy, when a pastor is in a position of a local church, he's going to be really tested on that. And the devil, if the devil knows that pastor's got a bad temper, that button's going to get pushed and pushed and pushed. And he's got to be patient. And I believe one place says patient toward all men. mistaken. Well, it says patience ain't this verse. But we're going to have to be patient. I mean, because you're going to deal with all sorts of problems, all sorts of issues, and things you'd never thought about that you were going to even have to deal with. And if you're quick-tempered, you're not going to be able to handle it. And so not a striker, not greedy, a filthy lucre. That's self-explanatory. He's not supposed to be in it for the money. And filthy lucre would imply something he's getting illegitimately, something he's getting under the table, or not as love offerings, but something that's dirty money somehow. Greedy of.
This man wanting that airplane or a new jet.
Yeah. Perfect example. It's these televangelists, charismatics who are. He's asking for like $54 million.
Yes.
So that he can give it to missions or help poor or give it to orphanages. He's wanting to buy a private jet with people's money.
He's fourth one.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the first one he's had. He's not the first one that's ever asked for one. I believe Oral Roberts one time told people all across America if he didn't get $600 million, God told him he's going to kill him. Yeah. And appeared to him in a dream. That's what he told him. People gave him money.
That's really tempting the Lord, ain't
it? Yeah. I wonder why the Lord don't do more than he does about that kind of stuff, but he lets it go most of the time, as far as I can see.
Sorry.
But it's filthy lucre. And so that's an extreme example. A local church, Baptists, who are mostly fundamental in their beliefs, if they're not careful, can get drawn into desiring filthy lucre. And that goes into the end of the verse. He says, not covetous. And that ties in, if a pastor or preacher's covetous, he's going to be drawn away into other ventures and things that are not spiritual things that are tying him up. They're tying up his time. They're tying up his resources. They're tying up his money, things that he should be given to time spent in the Word, prayer, ministry, whatever the thing is. And that covetousness is in all of us to a point. That's just something you've got to keep in check, because if you look at, this came to me, if you look at chapter 6 in this same book, he says in verse 6, he says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing, 1 Timothy 6:7, for we brought nothing into this world, and certain we can carry nothing out, and having food and raiment, let us therewith be content. So he should be content if he's got food to eat, he's got clothes to wear, a place to stay. What else does a preacher need?
Right.
If he's in it for the right thing. And he's not talking just about preachers, but Christians specifically, but we're talking about preachers in 1 Timothy 3. I mean, I could tell you, the spiritual mindset would be like the Lord Jesus Christ, where he said, my need is to do the will of God, the will of him that sent me. It's what pleased him. And a true minister, what is going to really float his boat is the ministry.
Right.
I mean, he's going to enjoy enough preaching, teaching, ministering to the saints, seeing people helped, seeing people saved, enough to where that's going to be his enjoyment if he's in it for the right reasons. He's not going to need all this stuff and all this extra stuff to do, and have his hand in 5 different baskets and his poker in 5 different fires, because there's too much to do for God in the ministry to be covetous. And what happens is, he says, let us have food and raiment. There's nothing better, folks. There's nothing better than ministering spiritually to people and seeing people help. There's nothing better than it. And if a person is off doing all this other stuff in covenants, trying to make money doing all this other stuff, there's something wrong there.
Right.
You see? There's something bad, a disconnect there somewhere. Because this thing is hard. The ministry is hard, but it's rewarding. Right? It's rewarding. Now, he says, but they that will be rich, see that? They that will be rich. It doesn't say they that are rich. They that will be rich, he says, fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil. Now he says, while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith.
Right.
Through what? Through covetousness. They erred from the faith. And pierced themselves through with many sorrows. But thou, O man of God, flee these things. Run from them. See? Follow after righteousness, godliness, faith, love, patience, meekness. Fight the good fight of faith. And so on and so forth. Okay? Back to chapter 3. So, not greedy of filthy lucre, not covetous. Okay, he says, but patient, not a brawler, not covetous. Patient, not a brawler, not covetous. Verse 14, one that ruleth his own house, having his children in subjection, with all gravity. For if a man know not how to rule his own house, how shall he take care of the church of God?
Right.
Now, that's a good qualification there, and it should be that a man is able to control his own household. His kids shouldn't be unruly and wild, and same thing with his wife. But again, you have to understand that things happen. Things happen. A man can do the absolute best job he can do with his kids, and they still may turn out.
Yeah.
They still may not turn out the way they should have because they've got their own will. And you also have to remember that once they turn 18, they're legally adults.
That's right.
So you couldn't, if the pastor did everything he could to raise the kids right, and they turned 18, went on their own, turned into hellions, you couldn't hold that against the man because they're adults. They're making their own decisions. But again, this thing ties back into blamelessness. Right? There shouldn't be anything that you can blame the husband, the man, for that is the cause of what is going on. Amen. Now, it would be wrong to be hasty in judgment and say the devil gets in there and just wrecks something. To say, well, the man's not fit. He may be doing everything he can do. If you're not careful, you'll think, well, it's his fault. It may not be his fault. Not everything's the husband's fault. Amen. And if you're not careful, what he'll do to try to keep that thing, if he'll try to keep that thing to fulfill that verse, he'll be a tyrant or be abusive or be. I've known examples of, not known personally, but read of examples in a big independent Baptist church in Indiana. A man at Hyles-Anderson College, I don't remember his name, but was a teacher there at the university at Hyles Church and College, and he's got like 110 years in prison right now because it was found, preacher, it was found they had an adopted daughter that was a little unruly, but not, wasn't a wild child or anything, but in order to keep her mild-mannered, they abused her. They tied her up. They burned her with cigarettes. They found enough evidence on this man and his wife to put him in prison for 110 years.
Wow.
So, if you're not careful, a man will see that verse and think, well, if I don't rule my house, then I'm going to be out of ministry. What bounds might he overstep in order to make sure? See, if you're not careful is what I'm saying.
Right.
The point is that a man or a woman in any relationship can do anything they absolutely 100% know to do to the best of their ability, and it doesn't guarantee that the other people are going to follow suit.
Right.
So this has to be a prime example. This would be the absolute 100% godly example of a man, a woman, and his family all doing what they're supposed to do. What I'm trying to give you the other side of it for is to try to get rid of some of the hypocrisy.
Yeah, I was about to say
That's
it.
it. To get rid of some of the hypocrisy and some of the Phariseeism that comes from trying to stick straight to the letter of some of this stuff. Okay. Now again, that's ideal. It's ideal.
That's how we are.
Huh?
That's how we are.
What do you mean?
I mean, when I was,
Be hypocritical?
I announced my calling to preach, and I was told that, if I don't have my children, it was a teaching, that, if the house ain't in order, then I'm out. scared me to death. And I mean, I was, my
And
Cassandra was 6 months old. I mean, she was just a baby, but I mean, it scared me. It just worried me. I mean, kept me in bondage. And I don't think they meant it in bondage, but that's what it did
That's where it ends up. It's the same thing with husband and one wife.
Right.
Same concept going back to that. What it ends up doing is putting the man in bondage to his family, his wife. I mean, what that did in effect was, they told you, okay, your kids get out of order, you're out.
Yeah.
Who's that put you in bondage to?
My
Kids.
my family, yeah.
Kids.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think that's what they was meaning.
but that's where.
But that's where it went.
And that's why I'm trying to give sort of a balanced view of this thing, because at the end of the day, folks, you can't make them do right.
Right.
You can't. You can't make. Now you can teach them. You should guide them. You should teach them the scriptures. Tell them about the Lord. Take them to church. Do everything. Discipline them. Make sure they got good discipline. Make sure they don't have the wrong influences. Make sure everything you can do to give them the best shot they've got to be godly. But you cannot make them godly. That's
Right.
just facts.
Right.
I wish it was that way. But some of you have raised kids, and more than one. And I've never had any, but I know that's a fact that you can't make people spiritual. That's something you can give them all the information they need. But at the end of the day, there's going to have to be a point in their life where they decide, hey,
They want to do it.
I'm going to follow God.
Right.
You can't make them do it. And even if you did make them do it, it wouldn't be right.
Right. And that's the same way as husband and wife. You can't make, and wife can't make, kind of thing.
On that,
I agree to that.
On having his house,
So there has to be a balance somewhere.
It does.
I'm sorry. It says having his children in subjection. It doesn't say he can do anything with his wife before
What?
What is it now?
Oh, it says one that rule as well his own house, having his children under subjection.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what you were saying about like the wife and stuff, but
Yeah, well, that would be included in his house.
well, I mean, she's an adult. You can't.
Right.
Hopefully, she'll take
Right.
and have.
Yeah. So the same balance would have to apply to the woman.
Right.
Because, I mean, a man at the end of the day can't make his wife do that.
Right.
And even if you beat them, they ain't gonna listen.
And even if you did do that, it would be. And if you had to do that, it wouldn't be right.
Okay, that wouldn't be what God said.
No. Right. So, I mean, again, at the end of the day, it's the same thing with a godly woman
Now your
who
children.
has a man that's a hellraiser. She can't make him do right, even if he's a Christian.
Now your children, as far as that goes, that's why they're under your roof. Once they're, I mean, like you said, once they turn 18 and leave, you have no control.
Right.
Which, as you was already saying, they have free will.
Best case, it would be children if they don't.
Well,
Right.
they're still children. They're your children.
Till they're 18.
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as they're in your house. Yeah. So that's again, there's the balance of that thing, and the general rule is, I mean, it's the same thing in church. If a man know not how to rule his own house, how can he take care of the church? Pastor can't make church members do right.
Right.
I mean, just because the church members go off and get backslid, does that mean the pastor didn't do right? Does that mean the pastor didn't tell them the truth, tell them what they need to do, tell them what's going to happen if they don't?
No.
He may very well have told them everything he know to tell them, and they could very well still go and do their own thing. It happens more often than not.
Right.
People don't listen more than they do.
Right.
So that goes the same thing. So again, like I say, this thing has to tie back into the idea of blamelessness. The man of God must not be able, you can't be able to say now, his children are, the charge shouldn't be like, his house is out of control because for XYZ reason. Or his wife is, going off because he don't pay her bills, or he don't help her pay the bills, or he's stealing the money and make, again, there's 100 circumstances you could come up with. But the idea is blamelessness. The idea is the idea for the minister is, and it's that's why it's such a tough gig, so to speak,
Right.
is because you have to live above reproach. At least to the best of your ability, you have to live above reproach. Because people are going to put you under a microscope.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to put you under a microscope, and they're going, especially if you preach right, if you teach right, if you preach with authority from the Word of God, they're going to look for anything and everything they can to find something wrong with you. Maybe not you folks, maybe not the Christians here tonight, but people in general.
Right.
Right.
You'll do that. And so the idea for a pastor is to live above reproach. If the wife decides she's done with the ministry and decides to leave, there should be nothing that can be pointed to the preacher and say, that's why. She left because he was stepping out. She left because he didn't, because she was neglected or, whatever. Whatever it means. He should be blameless. That's the idea.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.